Hello and welcome to Head-Mounted Destinations, a podcast about VR and VR game development. We provide our perspective as developers and give you, the listener, a sneak peek behind the curtain as to how VR games are made. I'm your friendly neighborhood host and level designer Carlos, and with me as always...
Hello, I'm Matt. I'm a gameplay programmer.
So over the past week and a half, I have played The Room VR. This is a game that Matt has been recommending to me for a while. I am familiar with the Room series in that it is a series of mobile games that eventually came to PC that were centered around puzzle boxes. Every level is like this very intricate puzzle box that you have to sort of feel around, pull at different tabs, flip switches in order to unlock like new compartments of the box or some new dongle for you to interact with until you get to the center of the box or whatever the doohickey is and you get like a thing. I think I've only played, before playing this in VR, I think I've only played this on my phone. Like I think I bought The Room 1 on mobile and I enjoyed my time with it. I don't know why I didn't really stick with the series, but playing The Room VR, like, I got a lot more than I was expecting, and I'm very happy with that. Also, like, I went into this game completely blind, basically. So I didn't really know what to expect, and then I sort of started getting this, like, Sherlock Holmes vibe, but then also there's, like, a bit of a Lovecraftian sort of vibe to it, and then on the mechanic level, it was just like a bunch of these cool interactions that we'll go into in a bit, but like when I loaded up The Room VR, when I bought it and was like, okay, I'm going to try this out, I wholly expected basically the mobile version, but like in VR. I expected to be stuck in one room with one puzzle box, and I'm feeling around for this puzzle box, and I'm trying to make sure this one puzzle box like unlocks in a certain way. And the game, thankfully, like expands upon that concept in a really cool way that I think fits VR very well. And it to some extent still keeps you in one room, you know, but it definitely, you know, it one-ups the idea of like, this is just a puzzle box game. So like, I wanted to know, what did you know about The Room VR, maybe the Room series itself? Like, what were your expectations going into The Room VR?
I'd played the Room games on mobile, and so yeah, I guess I sort of expected it to be about manipulating things, but I was really just curious how they would take that to VR, because yeah, you're right. There's a couple of directions you could go when you're trying to translate that concept. I knew it went through a couple of different environments. Someone had mentioned that to me. But yeah, I didn't really know anything too detailed going in. The sort of supernatural Lovecraftian aspect that you called out makes a lot of sense, because there is that sort of theme running through the narrative in the mobile games, this sort of like alchemy, magic, research, occult stuff.
Right. And at least in The Room VR, the way it presented this was like through these like astral projection, almost cutscenes. And also you would get these like pieces of paper that were written in like, you know, old timey Sherlock Holmes type quill writing where it's like, oh, I've been searching through the Amazon desert for this weird box, and it turns out that the old man found the box before me, and he's gone missing. And like, I don't know why, but that like really like resonated with me. It like harmonized with something like deep inside where I was like, oh shit, like I'm in a mystery. I want to figure this out.
Yeah, it starts you off as a police detective, right? And then you sort of fall down this supernatural rabbit hole. Yeah, it's cool because like it sort of hits all the elements that surround that fantasy, right? Like the first room that you're in is like in the museum, the like Egyptology lab or whatever, which is like very 1800s England, you know, like occult thing. And there's the witch's house and the Templar church.
Yeah, and like you're talking about all these like kind of like really different places, but they all fit within that I almost want to say like Sherlock Holmes / Indiana Jones. Like what did they call that? Like serials or something like that? Like yeah,
like serial fiction. It's sort of that like pulpy adventure type thing.
Pulp adventure. That's kind of like what I was looking for. you start, like you said, you're a police officer or a constable, whatever they call themselves, and you're in like the police office.
And you get a mysterious letter.
Right, a mysterious letter and a special pair of glasses that let you see occult writing everywhere, which, like, I love the mechanic of having, like, a secret world layer. Mm-hmm. And we have a bunch of, like, runes written on the floor, and I need to, turn on my magic eyeglasses to see the runes and then put those runes in a specific order on this puzzle box over here. Also, it sounds like these locations are so like, why are you even here? But it does a really good job of kind of slowly, layer by layer, taking you down there. And that's actually, layer by layer, we think of onions, the famous Shrek example, right? But that's how I actually view this game. I think it's actually really good to think of onions when thinking about the Room VR, because at a macro level, you have the onion, which is the mystery, right? And with every layer you peel off, that's like a new piece of parchment that you find in the level. And the macro thing, the macro journey itself is an onion, right? That's getting you from like Constable Place to museum, and then the museum going to like some sort of excavation site, and that's somehow leading to like this different world witch's house, and wherever else you go. And then looking at like one step smaller in scale is like the individual rooms. And this is what I love, is that the individual rooms, rather than what I expected, having just one puzzle box, they have at least 2 to 3 puzzle boxes. Even if it's like the very first level has like, I want to say 3 puzzle boxes officially. Like maybe the safe is a puzzle box. There's a literal puzzle box like in an office. And then there is like this dumbwaiter area that is also a puzzle box in a way, because I'm loosely using the word box, but like basically you have 3 puzzle terminals, right? Like you're going to stand at 3 different locations.
Yeah, terminal is a good description. It's sort of like puzzle areas almost, and there's multiple items in each that are going to thread back and forth between other points in the room.
Exactly, and that's where the frickin' onion comes back. You go to the terminals. Each terminal is its own little onion. You peel a layer. Holy shit! I found this key. This key's actually gonna let me take a layer off this onion that's at a different puzzle terminal. And like, the way those interconnect just feels so good, like every time. There were a couple times where, I got lost and stuff, but like that's to be expected in these puzzle games, right? And thankfully they do have a hint system, although I did wish that it was a little bit better. Like I felt like the hint system was very hard coded, in that like I was about 75% through the puzzle every time I needed a hint. And the first 2 hints were always from like just way, way earlier in the puzzle. It'd be like, oh, use your lenses to look at the wall. And I'm like, wait, no, I already did that. Like, that was like 3 onions ago. Like, can we get to the thing I'm at now? So like, that's like the only thing that I was like, oh, this could have been a little bit better in regards to like, I guess, user experience. But
it was nice to be like, oh, there's like these weird symbols. I wonder if these mean something. And then like at the end of the puzzle, you're like, oh, yep, okay, now I get to use the weird symbols.
Yeah.
Just in the level.
Oh my goodness, yes. Some of those things would be like such red herrings for me. And I guess I just don't play enough puzzle games, because like I'm not used to this, like, here's a piece of information presented and you're not going to need it for the next like 30 to 45 minutes. Like just disregard this. Okay. You got a key, jiggle it into this hole, do this like interesting little mini game, what have you. And then, yeah, like when it's long exited your mind, you're then like, what's with these inscriptions on the sarcophagus? Oh, wait. And like you come back to it.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of escape rooms in that way, where like every piece of evidence, it's like very clearly like, this is something that's going to be important, and it all sort of symbolically links. I guess that taps into like my 2 big thoughts about the game, which is like, first, I think it was a good choice to have things be very binary in whether or not you can interact with them. It was like, either this is 100% not important set dressing that you can't touch, or this is an item that's clearly marked as an item that goes into your inventory or whatever and behaves very specially.
Something I wanted to bring up with the items is the inventory screen. I both like it and really wanted it to do a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the UI is pretty bad.
Yeah, like it was, so the grid-based system with my items, like I'm fine with that, you know, do whatever you got to do. Me personally, as always, I'm going to want it super integrated into the VR. So like if it was a backpack or something that I was grabbing off of myself and like, you know, getting my key items out of, that would be cooler. But the thing that was actually like causing friction during my experience playing it was when the grid would present itself, I would just reach my hand fully into the grid to try to grab the key and pull it out. And like the game did not support that. Like the more immersive, like, oh, there's my key, yoink. Like, no, instead I had to, from a distance, like point my hand laser at the grid and then like press a button and it like warped to my hand.
Right. And for some reason the grid's really small.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like, doesn't make any sense. And same issue actually with the hidden world magnifying lens or whatever, where like you open up a menu and then you like do an interaction there rather than just like doing like a flip down motion next to the side of your head or something. Okay, you know in Lone Echo how you tap the side of your head to turn on the flashlight?
Yes.
Or another example is like in I Expect You to Die and a couple of other games, you like put in an earpiece at one point where you like literally grab like an earpiece and bring it up to your head and let go.
Right.
And then like the audio changes, you can hear something in your ear. That's like a very physical interaction that really like grounds parts of the world to your body. And so doing a similar thing where it's like you have spectacles on your head and you can just like flip them down with some sort of like little motion on the side of your headset, I feel like would be amazing for the fantasy. But instead you have to like press a button, open a menu, and then there's like a little toggle tab there.
I want to speak on that a little bit because I both see where you're coming from and I agree with you, but I also like what they did. Like the fact that it was an old-timey big light bulb camera almost, and you had to like pull this side tab, you know, to open the shutter or whatever. Like that was cool, but the fact that like it's always in this like floating menu, like that's not as cool. So like I feel like a good middle ground would have been like, hey, these are equipable glasses. Like open up your inventory menu, grab them, put them on your face, and then boom. But yeah, I totally agree. Like that definitely was trying to it at least like served the VR interaction part a little bit in that, hey, you have a pull tab, right? You're not just clicking on the thing, you're actually grabbing and like pulling it down.
I want to be like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, it appears to be some sort of ocular device or whatever. And like he's fiddling with tabs on his glasses. Like, I want that.
100%. Like, yeah, and I was getting like the big National Treasure vibes in that like museum level. Yeah, like that would be cool. And like, you know, since we're already speaking about the VR interactions, like I think that is kind of like the standing ovation point for this game, I suppose. Like I want to give it credit, but I also don't want to like, you know, I don't want to overhype anything, right? So like some moments that made me go like, whoa, like this is actually really cool and fun. It was like in the museum sarcophagus level when like you get this like long key tool and you have to put it in this box and then you turn on your magic lenses and you could see through the box and you're now turning the key and pulling it out and pushing it in to like navigate this sort of metal maze that you have like a hook in. And you can't move the hook around willy-nilly. You have to sort of like guide it and, you know, hopefully not touch the sides. I didn't know if it penalized you for touching the sides, but I sort of assumed that in my head and was now doing this like almost like tense lock picking thing where I'm like, oh, I see the inner mechanisms and I'm pulling the Pharaoh's like hook through the maze. And then like that was just a very simple like radial dial and like depth, right? And I think the Room VR just does a really great job of kind of like taking those either simple interactions or simple concepts and putting them into bigger, cooler contexts.
Yeah, if anything, I wish there'd been more of that. Like there were definitely key moments that were really, really cool. Another one that stands out to me is where you like go, well, we haven't talked about it yet, but there's a scale down mechanic where you can become tiny.
Yes.
The point where you go into a mechanism and you fiddle with it, and then you pop back out and you continue fiddling with it. And like, that's such a cool moment. Yeah, there were a couple of other like amazing moments.
The dollhouse, the dollhouse is the perfect example of that. Like, there's one small chunk in the game where like you have to interact with a dollhouse as a normal sized human, and then as you open up the dollhouse, you like have a piece that you're supposed to put in there, but you need to go tiny to go into the dollhouse to unlock the dollhouse, then go big so that you can open the dollhouse. And then as big person, as regular size human being, you put this little toy into the dollhouse, and then you go small to interact with the toy. And I was like, holy shit, this must have been the vertical slice for this game, because it's blowing my fucking mind, and it's combining everything that feels good about this game. Like,
yeah.
I love the scale down stuff in this game. I really, this ain't the end of the episode or whatever, but I want to see a sequel to the Room VR. Like, that cannot come soon enough for me. I need another game to pay attention to these VR interactions and do this cool interplay of different, like, really VR ideas of like, yeah, scale, tying that into the interactions, tying that into the whole onion back and forth. That moment blew me away, the dollhouse, so I just had to gush about it a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that's like by far the most positive part of the game, as well as the well-executed narrative and setting and tone and that kind of stuff. But I just wish those moments had come more frequently.
Same.
There was a lot, at least for me, there was a lot of this game that was like just wandering around between different areas, like being like, what do I do next? Which felt very Myst-like, sort of these strange environments, and you're just walking around being like, what is the next part of the puzzle? And just that was not doing it for me. Like, it wasn't really using VR. And then also a fair number of the interactions were just take a thing from your inventory and slot it into the right area, which was the least satisfying interaction out of everything, because it's just like, it's not very tactile. It's very finicky, where like you can just sort of like brute force it. You're like, does this slot into this? Nope. Okay, does this slot into this? And that was very unsatisfying. So I kept wishing that it was just like richer. The whole game had like more of those really cool puzzles with the tactile interactions, which is what the mobile games are about. So it was a little bit surprising that they didn't go 100% in on that.
Yeah, and if I could tie this a little loosely to our concept of tie-dye, when I would get into those long stretches of just trying to brute force or feel around the room to see like what will respond to me and or the equipment I have, that brought the crashing realization of like how tired I was, honestly. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like I actively got super tired, almost tired enough to just like take off the headset. But the thing is I would know that I'm like so close to finishing the level. I'm like, I do not want to jump into this room mid progress, which actually we should talk about in a bit, because that might be like a larger problem for the game. But like those sequences where I actually like, I know what's going on, I'm gonna do the puzzles and stuff, like I'm super engrossed and not being too phased by like the HMD against my face, however hot it's getting, not feeling too fatigued by like me standing or sitting for too long. But then once it gets to that point where like I don't know what to do for longer than a minute, it just becomes this like exponential increase of like discomfort and tiredness.
Yeah, you're totally right. I hadn't really called that out in my mind, but you're right. It's like the moment you're just standing around and you're not mentally engaged with like this mechanism or a specific sequence of actions you can plan out in your head, then you're just like, oh, I'm just standing here doing nothing. And additionally, I guess like you have to blow up some of your immersion at that point, because you're like, oh, right, this is not a real space. This is a space where one thing is explicitly linked to another, and I just have to find that link. And so suddenly you're like, okay, this doesn't matter, and you're turning it from an environment into like either an item that matters or an item that doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like in a way it turns like the onion into one of those like kids' toys that have like the cutout shapes and you're trying to put the square block into the circle hole.
Yeah.
And you're just like, why? You gave me this.
Yeah. That's definitely the worst part of the game, is when it turns into just a square block, square hole, star block, star hole puzzle. Yeah, there were a lot of points where it's like, I just need to find the star block, or I need to find the star hole.
And the hint system is there, like we brought it up before, and like in those moments where we're like, this is like tiring and I don't want to quit the level, like I'm very close to the end. For me personally, I just wanted to like, okay, hint until like I actually got the hint I needed, but they put a timer on the next hint. So like even worse, on top of me being like lost, tired, realizing that I've been playing for a fair bit, like I am now waiting. I am staring at this like decaying circular timer for like the answer to the thing I've been trying to figure out for the past like 20 minutes or whatever. Yeah. And that feels like a little patronizing when you're like, hey guys, I really did my due diligence here. Like I am at a freaking loss. Like, please just give me the hint I need. And that's, I guess, why I brought up earlier that like I wish it was more aware of like where I was in the sequence of events, because then I wouldn't have had to watch these timers and wait for the next hint.
I don't know. Thinking back to how The Room was on mobile, like that game was very much, at least in the way that I played it, it was very much about just like trying to find the next thing that's interactable. You're just like tapping around. You're like, does this move? Does this move? Does this move? No, okay. But like, it was still fun to like fumble through that. And I wonder if like just that general idea of a puzzle game that's fairly linear, but it's about trying to find out what the next mechanism is, maybe just like isn't an excellent fit for VR. Because like, I don't know, it seems like if you're thinking about a VR puzzle game, it should either be about manipulating these mechanisms in your hand where you have a clear idea of what you can do, but you're trying to fiddle around with it to like get the right sequence or something, or it's about observing and manipulating the environment, right? Like I think back to the end of the gallery episode 2, where you can like levitate stuff, right? You have that ability, and like you're locking in stones into place in this room, and then you like go up to a balcony and realize you can use your levitation power to rotate the entire chamber, and you use that to solve the puzzle. Like that's very fulfilling in VR because you're in the space and suddenly you get a new perspective on, you're like, oh, I can rotate the whole chamber. But when it's just, oh, I have this medallion with this symbol, I need to like hold it near something that matches. It just doesn't, it's like, I don't need to be in VR for this. And that's where, suddenly I'm tired, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think I could take two examples and kind of like illustrate what you're talking about. Like with the sarcophagus level, there's like the point where you get I think it's like the eagle, the lion, and some other statuette, right? And you got to put it in the sarcophagus. And you don't know what the combination is. You need to look to your left and then see the book that's just laying there, and the page that's open tells you like what sequence you have to put the things in. If you don't want to look at the book, like me initially, then you're just like, I don't know, you know that game where like you have 3 cups and they put a little pearl in their one cup and you're like switching them around. Like that's what I was doing with the statues on the sarcophagus. Yep. Just completely disrespecting this thing. Like, does it go here? Does it go here? Does it go here? That could be done. That could be done in a flat screen game, right? If it was a flat screen first person game, all you would have to do is like turn your camera. Oh, there's my hint. Okay, now I'm going to like apply the things right. But something that is way more VR in this game, I guess, is the piano. I think is probably the biggest and best example for what you were talking about, where again you have this interplay between going small, going big, but now you're manipulating the organ pipes, right? You had to like rotate this wheel of organ pipes in your human form, so that in the tiny form, the organ pipes, you could traverse them and go to different parts of the organ to grab key items or interact with things that would like progress you. And I really loved that part. That part was like, oh, I am manipulating my environment through like my scale, and it's not necessarily like I am manipulating the entire church that organ sits in, of course, but it is enough of affecting an environment that you do actually go into that it feels meaningful.
Yeah.
So something I wanted to highlight real quick is the way, I guess, the story was sort of not presented, but the way the story was activated. Like, you would get these pieces of paper that had a weird, like, Lovecraftian green shimmer to it, and when you turned on your special lenses, it had a hole. And you then would have to find this floating rune in the room and, like, focus on it through the hole in the paper. And I thought that was pretty cool. Just, you know, it's like, okay, real world, like the magical world, and, you know, these objects changing in your hand right before you. And then on top of that, you are doing this sort of like situational presence, right? There was like a small detail where I can't tell if it was flies or like smoke, but debris would go flying in the direction of the rune. So like, even if you didn't know where to look, you got this subtle cue of like, oh, wind is flowing in a certain direction. Like, maybe I should look in that direction, and then boom, like there's the rune. And you would like stare through it, and then the paper like dissolves, and suddenly a ghost appears. And I just kind of liked that. Like, I wouldn't want an entire game built around that, but when we're talking about the interstitial things that happen between the comic book panels, like, that's a fun little activity that also like helps to give the player context to what is happening. And I guess it's also a fairly good way to have a player focus on your cutscene before it begins, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about in Lone Echo 1 how, you know, many of the cinematics, it didn't really feel like there was any perfect spot for you to sit down and like watch it from. And granted, it's VR, right? Like, yeah, it's VR, you're supposed to be anywhere, but like, I still feel like if you're trying to present a story and or some sort of cinematic vision, like there should be a kind of presentation element to it, right? Like if you have events going on, even on a stage play, right? Stage play has very clear framing, and you want to have that framing for players within VR, because in a live stage show, we don't just allow the player to walk up on the stage and walk around and see the action from every viewing angle. And that's for the specific reason that we can tailor what's being presented. And I don't want to limit VR players. You know, VR for me is all about like freedom and stuff, but I want the care to go into like, what's the best way to show this, right? And that will probably blow up into a bigger conversation for another time, but I just thought it was kind of cool how that sort of primes you for the cutscene, and also just felt like a really neat, again, tonally correct, like it's eerie, but also the mystery is there, so you want to like find out more, and you're looking through these papers.
Yeah, it's a super good note about the visual effects and the way of gating those cinematics. This is a super small note, because we're talking about the paper. The paper is an interesting case study. When you grab it and you move it back and forth while you're holding it, it actually waves back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It has a little bit of like interaction. That's really cool. But also, you can't snatch the paper out of midair as it's doing its fly-in animation. It like magically appears and floats down to a rest. But you can't pick it up before it fully comes to a rest. And that was very jarring for me. Like, oh, I should be able to grab this thing because it's here. And I think that's like an interesting toy example of how, you know, immersion and presence, it's like very make or break on like little details potentially. Like, failing to adhere to a user expectation can be disproportionately jarring sometimes.
And to tie that back into what was just said, I think that is a lack of freedom, right? The player does not have the freedom to engage with the paper until the play, quote unquote, is done. The play being the little cinematic, animatic, where like the paper flies in and then rests casually on the desk in front of you. Like, I think I did the same thing, to be honest, because it just is like we've all done it. Like,
yeah, that's what you do.
If you've gone through grade school at any point and like dropped a binder of papers or seen a paper like falling down toward you, like, yeah, you try to catch it out of the air. I don't know. We're kind of like cats that way, with like cats with string or something, where it's just like, ooh, flappy paper, I must grab. And unfortunately, the game betrays our expectation of freedom because it says no, even though you can reach out and like do the grab button, we will not acknowledge that that is being done.
Right. And that philosophy works okay for a lot of the game because, I mentioned this previously, but it's important that it says, no, you can't interact with stuff that's not important at all. Because otherwise you're going to get confused by all these, set dressing red herrings. So like, it's okay that the game has that sort of like I'll tell you when you can interact with something sort of attitude for the most part. But this is like a very special case where like, there's no reason not to do that. Just because it's something we're presenting to you that's cool doesn't mean the player shouldn't be able to interrupt it, right?
Absolutely. Like, we take an example from like many open world games, maybe even more linear games from like non-VR space. Like, there is often a VO interrupt system, right? Because they know that they're going to have to give story to the player. Let's say we're playing like Grand Theft Auto. I'm driving down Vice City or whatever, and someone's telling me like, oh yeah, Tommy stole my cocaine, and then we're gonna have to like fix this and that, and ultimately it's gonna get, and then all of a sudden I like crash into somebody, right? And my gameplay then is affecting the VO because it would feel and sound weird if the guy kept talking after I hit somebody. So instead he's like, oh, Jesus Christ, man. So anyway, I'm thinking we're going to finish that thing with that guy. And it comes out to like, these sometimes very funny moments. But it's again, like respecting that player freedom, right? And and we could call it player agency is probably the bigger buzzword. But yeah, just like the more freedom a player has, and, put a little asterisk on it because nothing is absolute. But the more freedom a player has, the more engrossed they can become.
Sure. It might actually be good to draw that line between agency and freedom. Because I think about, say, Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, where you can shoot literally every NPC.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is an important story character? Nope. Blam. And because you can do that, you're making a choice not to do that when you're listening to them. And so it's, asking the player to, or I guess giving the player the freedom to totally disregard the game makes it a conscious choice to regard the game and engage with it, which makes you just more invested by default.
Right. Like, to some extent, you don't want to hear like, oh, how can you run that guy over? Like, you want them to finish their VO because you don't want to be stuck in the same conversation for like too long. We all know this as players. We appreciate story, but damn it, do not dilly-dally. Really cool game though. Like, again, I want to get another game that's like really focusing on these VR interactions and tying them together with that great tone. And like, it doesn't have to be a mystery, but I guess the mystery just lines up really well with the whole puzzle game philosophy, right? Because like, you're slowly trying to reveal information and piece together that information to come to a solution. But I'm just saying, like, give me these interactions again and give me like the small enough threads that I need to pull through, right? Because this isn't a lone echo, however many bundles of money story with big cutscene acting. Like, it's mostly told in, written text. And maybe there are some voiceover sections, and the acting parts are, just one person recorded for a couple of moments. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if, they only had like a day of recording with like most of these people or something like that.
Yeah.
Anywho, if you haven't tried it yet, go and try The Room VR. A Dark Matter, I believe, is the subtitle of it. It's very cool. Definitely deserves some love. And I think, if you try it out, you'll have a good time. So like, go to this head-mounted destination.
Hey there. If you liked this episode of Head Mounted Destinations, the best thing you can do is share it with a friend. Word of mouth really helps us out.
You can listen to the show on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or watch it on YouTube, where we put gameplay footage alongside some of the points we're making throughout the episode.
If you'd like to discuss this episode or suggest future topics, visit our subreddit at reddit.com/r/headmountedpodcast.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you at the next Head Mounted destination.